Jim Jones, the leader of an American religious cult.
Jim Jones led over 900 of his followers into the mass suicide.
One of the biggest mass suicides in recorded history.
He is the mass murderer. And you asked me before what I felt about Jim Jones. I think he's a monster.
Jim Jones became a maniac. There's no doubt about it.
You said he's crazy.
No.
Do you think he was always crazy?
No, I don't. I don't think he was always like that.
Call me father, call me mother, call me morphodite, call me queer, call me whatever you want. I don't care what you call me. I'm not afraid of nobody.
What is going on with y'all, man? Look, it's Black Balloon, and I'm coming back with another video, so y'all already know what's going on. Alright, y'all, I'm excited to bring this video to the channel. Now, this video is kind of overdue in my mind because back way before they deleted this channel, when YouTube deleted it, I was doing videos that were kind of surrounding cults, right? Because I had did the Phoenix River and the Children of God cult video, which is still on this channel. I did the Sharon Tate, Helter Skelter, you know, that whole Charles Manson thing that was, you know, cult related and connected to the CIA. So I remember back then someone asking me to look into Jim Jones. Now, recently, a couple of y'all have also requested Jim Jones, so it's kind of coming back around. Now, what makes this relevant is the fact that Netflix just dropped that documentary, Waco, Texas, American Apocalypse, that was also about the cult that was in Texas. And y'all know they had like a 50-day standoff with federal agents. They killed 4 or 5 federal agents. So it was huge news back in like 1993. Now, when I saw that Netflix and I was going through some comments, I saw someone request recently to do Jim Jones. I was like, boom, this must be the perfect time to bring this video to the channel and expose the real truth behind some of this stuff, right? So to give y'all like a formal introduction of people that may not know about the People's Temple, Jonestown, and Jim Jones, I'm going to read y'all, you know, just the basics before we actually get into the real truth about the Jonestown's massacre. So it says the Jonestown massacre occurred on November 18th, 1978. A lot of things happened on November 18th. I swear they love that date. It says, but more than 900 members of American cult called the People's Temple died in a mass suicide murder under the direction of their leader, Jim Jones, 1931 to 78, supposedly. It took place at the so-called Jonestown's settlement in the South American nation of Guyana. Jones had founded what became the People's Temple in Indiana in the 1950s, then relocated his congregation to California in the 1960s. In the 1970s, following negative media attention, the powerful, controlling preacher moved with some 1,000 of his followers to the Guyanese jungle, where he promised they would establish a utopian community. On November 18th, 1978, U.S. Representative Leo Ryan, who had gone to Jonestown to investigate claims of abuse, was murdered, along with 4 members of his delegation. That same day, Jones ordered his followers to ingest poison-laced punch while armed guards stood by. Origins of the People's Temple. Prior to terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001, the tragedy at Jonestown marked the single largest loss of U.S. civilian lives in a non-natural disaster. Jones was born on May 13, 1931 in rural Indiana. In the early 1950s, he began working as a self-ordained Christian minister in small churches around Indianapolis. In order to raise money to start a church of his own, the charismatic Jones tried various ventures, including selling monkeys door to door. So that was just to basically give you an introduction to the Jonestown massacre for people that may have never heard of it or, you know, didn't have kind of the basic understanding of what we're about to talk about. So now we will move on to the next section of this video and get into what the Jonestown massacre was actually all about.
I represent divine principle, divine socialism. I will not pass away, but I shall stand throughout the endless ages of time.
You heard the message you wanted to hear. That was kind of what his talent was.
For good and evil both. He played both sides of the coin. Good to draw people in, and then evil to control them.
He was a predator who had really mastered the art of luring people from every segment of life.
And as time went on, he talked less and less about God and more about social transformation in increasingly dark and semi-apocalyptic ways.
Armageddon that would spring forth in a nuclear hell, we have to be prepared for that, but we also have to be prepared to go to other places in the world if a dictatorship takes over. Because I told you that not one of my children is going to end up in a concentration camp. I said they'll have to kill us all first.
I thought that Jim could actually walk on water. I seriously thought that he had the power of God.
Reach the fingers out that are bothering you.
I thought he could heal because I saw healings and I thought they were real.
Now, is the pain gone?
He had a secretary from the church dressed up as though she were a woman with a disability.
You have a bad spinal condition?
Yes.
And your hip.
And sit in a wheelchair in the middle of this gigantic congregation. And he commanded her to stand.
Take that step. Bless your heart. Take that step. Take that
And she did so. And he commanded her to walk, and she did so.
Move forward, darling. You can do it. Move forward.
And then she began to run.
Walk. Walk.
And understandably, the congregation lost their stuff.
The more people came, the more people had to be healed. So the way I build faith, I'm going to fake a healing here and there. How long do you think it takes before you're faking all of them? Because that's way easier than really healing people, right?
He was tricking people, but did people see it? Did people see it? People wanted to believe so much that they didn't see the negativity. The ends justified the means, so you dismissed those means.
The only thing I can do is to be an aggressive heterosexual with a man or woman. I don't care whatever you want to be. You be the woman. I would do that for socialism.
Told you there, I've had to crawl in bed with men and put up with for this cause. I've had to lay with women I hated till my skin crawled. Call me father, call me mother, call me morphodite, call me queer, call me whatever you want. I don't care what you call me. I'm not afraid of nobody.
Get in there, Mary. Hold it in there. That's it. Get in there.
And they're beat till they're bloodied. And Jim's snickering, that sick giggle that he had in the background.
Mary's getting him a hell of a time up here. Hold in there, boys. Black and white together, you're having a little trouble. They're turning blue. We lost one white one. We got one black and one blue.
All right, y'all. Now, before I got into much research about this video and about Jim Jones and the Jonestown massacre, the People's Temple cult, I had actually watched the first 2 episodes, which is only 3, of that Netflix documentary on the Waco, Texas-based cult, right? And it kind of made me start pitting 2 and 2 together, so to speak, you know, because back then in those days, kind of like 60s up into the 80s and the 90s, you know, you had a lot of serial killers, like things that we don't have in today's time, or at least not as, you know, up to the level that they were 20, 30 years ago. And you had a lot of cults. And, you know, we've already done Jeffrey Dahmer. We've already talked about John Gacy on this channel. And we've connected some of those back to the, you know, basically the military-industrial complex, the CIA. And my natural self, before I did, you know, research on Jim Jones, I kind of was thinking like, you know, there was a lot of cult stuff going on in that time around the 60s, 70s, you know, basically when the CIA was at their like prime of running field operations that had to do with mind control and MK Ultra. I couldn't help but just think that. Now, I hadn't done much research on this topic yet, and come to find out, that the things that I was thinking and just, kind of putting together in my head off my own, sense of all this stuff and why, back then in those days, why was it so popular for people to basically give their lives to someone who was, proclaiming themselves to be the second coming of Jesus? Even like the documentary on Netflix with the Waco, Texas cult, I forget the actual name of their cult, but the documentary name on Netflix was Waco, Texas, American Apocalypse. So excuse me for that. But, their leader, his name was like David K. something. He proclaimed to be the second coming of Jesus. And it gets to a point where it's like, either people were so gullible and naive that they would believe anything toward a man who gave them something to believe, or just resembled something along the lines of their beliefs, or they was just, so naked in their own beliefs that, any person that comes along and massage their thoughts the way that they want them to be, they would bow down to them. It makes you think either people back in those days were just that gullible, or, these men, they were, maybe in a sense, these men were possessed. Maybe they held a spell over their followers. And I'm speaking of Jim Jones and the leader of the cult in Texas, Waco, Texas, where it happened at. Maybe they had some kind of spell over their followers to get them to even actually believe that they were some kind of second coming. Because even Jim Jones kind of, he kind of followed those lines as well, which is why I was putting some of those clips of him talking in this video. So it kind of makes you wonder what would make these kind of people believe in one man to be like the answer to their everything in life. But then it kind of goes back to the CIA, mind control, and the type of people that they preyed on. These kind of people maybe didn't have the average, like mental capacity or mental strength as a normal person who wouldn't go for this random dude calling himself the second coming of Jesus. So, in my research, I found this article, right? So this is kind of where the video gets really juicy, and it goes into the complete opposite narrative of what the media gave you about the 900 plus people who were supposedly a part of a mass suicide in Jonestown, which was in Guyana. November 18, 1978, over 900 bodies were discovered in Jonestown, the makeshift compound established in Guyana by the People's Temple sect. In an act of so-called revolutionary suicide, most had taken their own lives by ingesting cyanide in a grape-flavored beverage. The group had killed a congressional representative and realized that this would bring the wrath of the U.S. government down on them. At least, that is the official story. Numerous investigations and books have been written about the Jonestown massacre, with many bluntly arriving at the conclusion that the whole affair was a CIA-orchestrated project, rather than a brainwashed cult who took their own lives. When you look at some of the points raised, several aspects of the Jonestown incident don't quite add up, even if they don't conclusively prove that the CIA was the mastermind. And I can very well much agree with that, and I'm pretty sure y'all will once we go over these 10 points. Number 10, Jim Jones CIA connections and lack of official body identification. Although it is impossible to prove beyond any doubt, some researchers in the Jonestown incident, including Michael Myers, in his book, Was Jonestown a CIA Medical Experiment?, have asserted that Jim Jones, the leader of the People's Temple cult, was a CIA asset and had been since the group's inception in 1955 in Indianapolis, Indiana. The sect moved to California in the mid-1960s. There, Jones' influence grew, and with it, the attention of law enforcement. They kept their interest in Jones and his group following the sect's move to Guyana in the mid-1970s. As you might imagine, there were also some discrepancies over Jones' death. It is claimed that his body was found with a bullet hole in the head that appeared to be self-inflicted. However, some researchers argue that his body had a high barbiturate level, which would have made it difficult or impossible to pull the trigger of a gun. Furthermore, some conspiracy theorists say that Jones' body was not identified by official means such as dental records. These discrepancies have led to debate over whether this body actually belonged to Jones and whether he died at Jonestown at all. Now, y'all already know, I don't believe this man died. because they say after he forced those 900 people, which we're going to get into the fact that it may not have even been 900 in a second. So after the people all committed suicide, mass suicide, he supposedly offed himself. As soon as I saw that the CIA may have been involved in this and he was an asset, I automatically knew he didn't kill himself right there. You know, a lot of people were like, oh, he was a coward. He didn't poison himself and die with his people. He shot himself in the head. Boom. That should already let you know. A narcissistic guy like this, he's not going to kill himself with everybody else. Guaranteed. Guaranteed he did not die that day. I'm pretty sure he's dead now, but he did not die that day. And the thing is, there was another article I read that said he actually used body doubles because there was a duplicate passport made in his name when he was supposedly in an entirely different country. Someone picked up that passport that was in his name, so on and so on. And I actually saw it in another article where they said he used body doubles as well. So this was almost well known that he may have had a body double that was helping him be in two places at one time. So the ninth point, the ambush of Leo Ryan. Leo Ryan was a U.S. congressional representative who had traveled to Jonestown on a fact-finding mission. On the morning of November 18, 1978, Ryan recorded what he believed to be several human rights violations. He also rounded up about 15 of Jones' followers who no longer wished to be trapped in Jonestown and wanted to return to the United States. As Ryan was about to board his waiting plane, he was shot dead on the Guyanese runway. His death, or more to the point, what led to it, was awash with conspiracy and perhaps rightly so. Ryan had intended to remain in Jonestown for several more days, but a seemingly random knife attack by a sect member caused significant injuries to Ryan. Although the wounds weren't life-threatening, the event forced him to leave with the returning members of the sect so that he could receive proper medical treatment. As he and the others began to board the plane, they were ambushed by some of Jones's men, apparently by Jones's order, who opened fire on the departing group. 5 were shot dead, including Ryan. Several others were wounded. One of the ambushers was Lawrence Layton. Posing as a defector, he had traveled with the members wishing to leave Jonestown despite several warnings from members that Layton should be made to stay as he was not to be trusted. And they were right. So basically, he was posing as one of the guys that were trying to defect when truthfully he was on a mission to kill this congressional representative who were basically going to spill the beans on what the CIA had going, and they couldn't allow that to happen. Next, we get into the Layton family connections, which is the guy that posed as a defector and actually murdered the congressional representative. On the surface, it might seem that Lawrence Layton was simply a loyal follower of Jim Jones, and so he took matters into his own hands. However, when you look at some of his family's connections, particularly in the light of the Jonestown massacre, there's certainly the possibility that his actions were predetermined long before that morning. For example, his father, Layton Sr., is believed to have invested huge amounts of money and resources into Jonestown. When you look at his background, it is easy to see why an eyebrow too would be raised. Layton Sr. had extensive involvement in the development of biological warfare and genetic experimentation programs for the U.S. government. Layton's junior mom had her own questionable background. Her wealth was said to have originated from IG Farben, the same company behind the Nazi death camps in World War II. Think about that, y'all. The guy that is, basically a friend of Jim Jones, a part of his cult, his parents had their wealth and were involved in biological warfare and genetic experimentations. Then the mom basically got all her wealth, probably an owner or worked for this company that was behind the Nazi death camps, y'all. And supposedly they killed almost 1,000 people. Bunch of drugs on the site, drugs that would, never be able to have been, accessed by regular people. Basically, this connection to the Nazi regime is even darker due to the accusations of mind control at Jonestown, which are said to have originated in the concentration camps of Europe and then carried on via Operation Paperclip, which we've done a video on under the U.S. intelligence services. Another connection was George Philip Blakely, the husband of Lawrence Layton Jr.'s sister. Blakely was a known CIA contract agent. It is claimed that he provided the down payment to secure the land for Jonestown. Number 7, Richard Dwyer. Although it is only an educated guess, the person most likely responsible for sending Leo Ryan to Jonestown was Richard Dwyer. He had a well-documented past with the CIA that went back to the late 1950s. Here we get more connections that the CIA was behind it all. While the Jonestown fiasco was unfolding in 1978, Dwyer served as the deputy head of the U.S. Embassy in Guyana. In short, he was America's eyes on the ground in Guyana and perfectly placed to monitor or assist Jones, depending on which side of the story you believe. It is also claimed by some investigators that Dwyer had close connections to the cult leader, Jim Jones. A recording made during the apparent suicides in the compound appeared to offer proof of Dwyer's involvement in the massacre. Jones can be heard clearly saying, "Get Dwyer out of here." This indicated Dwyer's presence there at the time of the killings. For their part, intelligence agencies simply say that Jones was likely drugged and hazy at this point and misidentified Dwyer. Right. Make of that what you will. Number 6, Mark Lane. One easily overlooked angle of the whole Jonestown affair was the eventual treatment of attorney Mark Lane. He was well known for representing James Earl Ray, the man charged with the murder of Martin Luther King Jr. Lane believed that Ray had been set up and made his knowledge public. Lane was also in the process of reinvestigating the Kennedy assassination at the time of the Jonestown massacre. In addition, he was acting as an attorney for the People's Temp sect. He was openly positive about the group, and in particular Jim Jones. Lane even publicly stated his belief that Jonestown was paradise on earth in a magazine interview. Following the discovery of hundreds of bodies and a possible mass suicide at Jonestown, many began to view Lane and his opinions differently. To some, this was intentional on the CIA's part as it looked to discredit Lane. By extension, it would invalidate his views that James Earl Ray was innocent and that JFK's assassination warranted further investigation. Now that's pretty huge. Given what we know about the JFK murder, it is understandable that some believe that they can see hallmarks of intelligence interference in Jonestown. Number 5, evidence of MK Ultra mind control in Jonestown. Now that it sounds a little fanciful, even outlandish, but there's compelling argument made by Myers. He examines how the members look more akin to prisoners, even wearing hospital-type wristbands. Myers, however you pronounce his name, also noted that the medical facilities on site were completely state-of-the-art, while the majority of Jonestown was poor. He even cited the demographics of the sect's members, many black people, poor women, and former prisoners, as being remarkably similar to those in past CIA experiments. When you add in the connections of some people like the Layton family, his statements certainly make you take a second, maybe even a third look at the official line, which goes back to what I said earlier about, maybe these kind of people that they preyed on made it a lot easier, for them to be targets of mind control. Number 4, the Mendocino State Mental Hospital, which is located in Ukiah, California. It is also claimed by researchers that Jim Jones enjoyed certain protections during the time that the People's Temp sect was in California, including from then California Governor Ronald Reagan. Reagan was also active in the election of eventual San Francisco Mayor George Moscone. Supposedly, these connections allowed the group to take over the operation of the Mendocino State Mental Hospital. Now, why is this important? Because at first the agreement was that the hospital would supply the group with test patients, but within weeks, every member of the staff was also a member of the People's Temp sect. Those who refused to join were fired and replaced with a group member. So this already screams MK Ultra right here, folks. Just look at this mental state hospital. Look at that. Y'all already know what's going on with that. So, number 3, discrepancy on body count and bodies. There was, and still to some, a huge discrepancy concerning the number of people who died in Jonestown, the number who committed suicide there, and bizarrely enough, how many bodies were actually found. For example, while authorities were still in the process of identifying the dead and taking a final body count, Robert Pastor, an aide to U.S. National Security Advisor Brzezinski, ordered everyone to cease all activities even though 500 bodies had not been found. Of the 400 that were, only a handful had been properly identified. Rather bizarrely, the official explanation was that the missing 500 bodies were found underneath the other 400 bodies. So 500 bodies was found under 400 bodies. Please make that make sense. How can 500 bodies be under 400 bodies? Now, I would understand if 500 was under the other 500, but there's an extra 100 that was underneath the other 300. What I'm saying don't even make sense. I know 500 bodies over 400 bodies don't make sense. Make that make sense for me, y'all, please. Anyways, furthermore, Dr. Leslie Mutu, the Guyanese chief medical examiner, went on record to state that of the bodies he had seen, only 200 looked to have committed suicide. He believed that most of Jonestown cult members had been murdered. Think about that, y'all. Y'all already know. It's just like how, in the videos where we do, sacrifice videos of the industry, and, you get, this person died, or, these 2 people died, and the news, they come out with, 3 people died, then the real number was actually 6, and so on and so on. It's the same thing with this. So at the end of the day, we already know what's going on here. This was all done by the CIA. This was all orchestrated long before, and nothing of the mainstream narrative is true. Last couple of points. The 2 other motives of the CIA. If we assume that these accusations and claims are true, what would the CIA have to gain from the Jonestown massacre? If we look at Leo Ryan, whose murder indirectly provided the reason for the mass suicide pact, he was a man who had few friends and many enemies within the CIA. He was pushing for transparency about the CIA's activities and co-authored the Hughes-Ryan Amendment as part of this drive. Needless to say, the CIA is secretive, even within its own organization, which we know, and had no desire to operate in such an open way. They certainly wouldn't have shed any tears over Ryan's demise, which cured a headache for them. Aside from accusations of mind control experiments, the massacre would also give the CIA a chance to train mercenary fighters who could be used in the region. They would do the dirty work of the intelligence agency whenever muscle on the ground was needed for such things as coups, uprisings, or even false flag attacks. In short, if it's true that the CIA was involved in Jonestown, they had a lot to gain. Now, the last point is Jim Jones's hit list and the murder of George Moscone. 9 days after the Jonestown massacre, Mayor George Moscone was shot and killed in San Francisco, California. A random attack? Possibly. But Moscone had some intriguing connections to Jim Jones and the People's Temp sect. They had invested heavily in Moscone's campaign, and in return, it would appear that many sect members were given jobs within the welfare department of the city. According to some researchers, this acted as a recruiting platform, giving the sect access to the poorest, most vulnerable, and most impressionable members of society. Moscone also refused to investigate the sect before their move to Guyana in the late 1970s, which further tied him to the group. In the years following the Jonestown massacre, it came to light that Jones had arranged for busloads of people to go to San Francisco and illegally vote in the mayoral election. It was also claimed that Moscone's name was on a Jones hit list. In addition to Moscone, former sect member Jenny Mills, who had written several critical pieces about the group, was gunned down at her home along with her husband and daughter. Assuming for one moment that Jones didn't die in Jonestown, was he responsible for having Moscone and the Mills family killed, or was the CIA looking to close off all connections to their involvement? I think it was kind of a mix of both. I definitely don't think Jim Jones, after, researching this cult, I don't think he died that day. I definitely, I 100% don't believe he died that day. I definitely believe the latter narrative about this basically being, Jim Jones being a CIA asset, and this was all an orchestrated mind control experiment done on, very vulnerable and impressionable people, and, the minority, so to speak, at that time. Which is very typical of the things that I have studied over the last couple of years. It all lines up to being something very sinister at the end of the day. And, all leading back to the hands of, the CIA, man. I think right there is where I'm going to wrap this video up. I don't want to keep going on and on about a bunch of points we've already went over. Plus, I feel like I did a lot of talking in this video. But yeah, y'all, I definitely like to know what y'all really think about Jim Jones and this People's Temple cult, the Jonestown massacre, and the CIA involvement. So as always, get a conversation going back and forth. Any suggestions that y'all have for me, y'all want me to do in the near future, just let me know, as y'all always do. And with that being said, it's Black Balloon, and I'ma see y'all soon. I'm out.